The worst moment of my life was not when my daughter was rushed into the ICU. It was when I realized I was completely alone. My little girl was lying in a hospital bed, her tiny body burning with fever, machines beeping around her, doctors moving quickly, nurses whispering medical terms I barely understood, and the only thing I could do was sit beside her bed holding her small hand and praying she would open her eyes again. But what hurt even more than the fear was the silence, not from the hospital, from my own family. A few hours earlier, when the doctors said her fever had crossed 104 and they needed to move her into the ICU, immediately my hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. Still, I opened the family group chat, the same group where everyone talked every single day. My parents, my older brother, my sister, my cousins. Dozens of messages every day about dinners, birthdays, jokes, politics, even stupid memes. I typed one message. My daughter is in the ICU. Please pray for her. Then I hit send. And I waited. I kept staring at my phone, hoping someone would reply. Maybe my mother would say she was coming to the hospital. Maybe my brother would call. Maybe someone would ask if I needed help. But nothing came. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2. The message showed seen. Every single person in that chat had seen it. But nobody replied. Not a single word. I tried to tell myself they were busy. Maybe they were driving. Maybe they didn't understand how serious it was. But deep down, I knew the truth. They had already decided something about me a long time ago. To them, I was the irresponsible one, the black sheep of the family, the guy who never made the right choices. When I chose to start my own business instead of taking the safe office job my father arranged, they called it foolish. When my business failed 2 years later, they called it proof. When my wife left during the hardest year of my life, they called it karma. And when I ended up raising my daughter alone, they called it my punishment. So when I asked for help that night, they stayed silent. The ICU hallway was cold and almost empty. The fluorescent lights buzzed quietly above me as I sat there with my phone in my hand, staring at the family chat. Still nothing. A nurse walked past and gave me a small, sympathetic smile. Try to get some rest, she said gently. I nodded even though rest felt impossible. Inside the ICU room, my daughter's tiny chest moved slowly under the blanket. Tubes and wires surrounded her like something out of a nightmare. She was only 6 years old. 6! No child should ever be in a place like that. I leaned closer to her bed and whispered softly, "You're strong, sweetheart. Just fight a little longer." Her fingers twitched slightly in my hand, and that tiny movement felt like the only hope I had left. Another hour passed. Still no message from my family. I opened the group chat again. My message was still sitting there, lonely and ignored. Right above it was a conversation from earlier that afternoon. My cousin had sent pictures of a new car he bought. Everyone had replied instantly. "Wow, amazing! Congratulations! Beautiful car!" Dozens of excited messages. But when I said my daughter was in the ICU, silence. My chest felt tight, but I forced myself not to cry. Not here, not now. Because my daughter needed me to stay strong. Around midnight, the doctor finally walked toward me from the ICU doors. My heart started pounding immediately. "Doctor, how is she?" I asked, standing up so fast my chair scraped loudly across the floor. He looked tired but calm. "We're still trying to stabilize the fever," he said. "The next few hours are very important." The next few hours. Those words felt heavier than anything I'd ever heard. I sat back down slowly. Then my phone buzzed. For a moment my heart jumped. Maybe someone from my family finally replied. Maybe my mother. Maybe my brother. I quickly unlocked my phone and opened the group chat. But it wasn't a reply to my message. It was a completely new message from my older brother. A simple one. "Guys, quick reminder. Tomorrow is Dad's birthday dinner. Don't forget to come early." And immediately, the chat exploded with replies. "Of course. I'll bring the cake. See you tomorrow. Can't wait." Message after message appeared. Laughing emojis, celebration emojis, plans for dinner. Not one person mentioned my daughter. Not one person even acknowledged the message I sent earlier. My hands started shaking again. But this time it wasn't fear. It was something else. Something colder. Something heavier. I slowly typed another message. My fingers hovered over the screen for a few seconds before I pressed send. The message appeared under all their happy birthday plans. This might be the last night my daughter is alive. And for the first time in hours, the chat went completely silent again. 3 minutes passed, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Then suddenly, my phone rang. It wasn't my brother. It was a number I didn't recognize. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. "Hello?" A calm voice spoke on the other end. "Is this Daniel Carter?" "Yes, who is this?" There was a brief pause. Then the man said something that made my entire body go still. "I'm calling from the legal office of your father." "My father?" I frowned, confused. "My father? What do you mean?" The man continued in the same calm voice. "There has been a development tonight." "What kind of development?" I asked slowly. Another short pause. Then he said, "Your father just made a decision that will affect your entire family." I felt a strange chill run down my spine. "What decision?" The man exhaled quietly. "Well, according to the documents he signed tonight." He paused again. "You are now the only person in the family who controls everything." And at that exact moment, The ICU alarm behind me suddenly started screaming. For a split second, the world around me disappeared. The alarm from the ICU cut through the hallway like a knife, sharp and terrifying. Nurses rushed past me, pushing the doors open with urgency. One of them shouted something I couldn't fully hear. My heart dropped into my stomach. "My daughter," I whispered, already running toward the doors. But a nurse quickly stepped in front of me. "Sir, you can't come in right now." "What's happening?" My voice cracked as panic flooded through me. "They're stabilizing her. Please wait here." Wait, that word felt cruel. Behind the glass window, I could see doctors moving around her bed, their faces serious, their hands working quickly. Machines flashed numbers I didn't understand. My legs felt weak, and I leaned against the wall to stay standing. The phone was still pressed against my ear. "Mr. Carter?" The voice from the legal office said calmly. "Are you still there?" For a moment, I had completely forgotten about the call. "Yes," I said quietly, staring through the glass. "I'm here." "I'm sorry for the timing," he continued, "but your father insisted this information be delivered immediately." My father insisting on something immediately was not unusual. He had always been a man who believed time was power, and control was everything. "What exactly did he sign?" I asked slowly. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Your father transferred full authority over the Carter Family Trust." I blinked. That name alone carried weight. The Carter Family Trust wasn't just some bank account. It controlled nearly everything my family owned. Properties, investments, businesses, companies that employed hundreds of people. For years, everyone in the family assumed my older brother would inherit control of it. He was the golden son, the successful one, the one who followed my father's rules. Not me, never me. "Why would he transfer it to me?" I asked quietly. There was a pause on the other end. "That is something you may want to ask him directly." My chest tightened. "Is he at home?" "No," the lawyer replied. Another pause. "Your father was admitted to the hospital tonight." My grip on the phone tightened. "What?" "He suffered a stroke earlier this evening." For a moment, I couldn't speak. A stroke. My father, the same man who always seemed untouchable, suddenly lying in a hospital bed somewhere. The doctors say his condition is serious. The lawyer continued. "Before he lost consciousness, he signed several documents. And one of them gives me control." I asked. "Yes." My mind raced. None of this made sense. My father hadn't spoken to me properly in 3 years. The last time we talked, he told me I had embarrassed the family by failing my business. He said I had proven I wasn't capable of carrying the Carter name. And now, he had given me control of everything. Why? Another wave of alarms echoed faintly from inside the ICU. I looked through the window again. The doctors were still working. One of them pressed something into my daughter's IV while another adjusted the machine beside her. My chest felt like it was being crushed. "Mr. Carter," the lawyer said again, "there is one more important detail." I swallowed. "What detail?" "The transfer becomes fully active at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning." Meaning? Meaning that by tomorrow morning, every company under the Carter Family Trust will answer to you. My thoughts immediately went to my brother. Daniel, he worked at Carter Holdings. Not just worked there, his entire career depended on it. His promotions, his reputation, everything. And by tomorrow morning, he would technically be working under my authority. The same brother who had just ignored the message about my daughter in the ICU. The same brother who told everyone I was a failure. The lawyer continued speaking. "There will be a board meeting tomorrow afternoon to officially confirm the transition." "Who knows about this already?" I asked. "Currently only the legal team and the hospital administrator who witnessed the signature. So my family doesn't know yet." Mo. I glanced down at my phone again. The family chat was still open. Messages about my father's birthday dinner were still sitting there. Plans, jokes, laughter. None of them had asked about my daughter again. Not one. My jaw tightened slightly. "Oh, Mr. Carter?" The lawyer said carefully. "Once this becomes public tomorrow, it will likely cause some tension within your family." That was the most polite way anyone had ever described the disaster that was about to happen. "They all expect Daniel to inherit control, don't they?" I asked. "Yes." I let out a quiet breath. Then the ICU doors suddenly opened. A doctor stepped out quickly, removing his gloves. My heart jumped again as I rushed toward him. "Doctor, how is she?" He looked at me seriously. For a moment, her heart rate dropped suddenly. My entire body froze, but we were able to stabilize it, he continued. Relief crashed over me so hard I nearly collapsed. "She's stable for now," the doctor said gently. "For now," I repeated. "The fever is still very high. The next several hours will be critical." The next several hours. Again, everything depended on time. The doctor gave me a reassuring nod before walking back into the ICU. I leaned against the wall again, exhausted. The lawyer's voice came through the phone once more. "Mr. Carter, yes, you may want to prepare yourself." "For what?" "For the reaction your family will have tomorrow." I stared at the family chat again, at their laughing messages, at their complete silence about my daughter. Slowly, I typed something into the chat. Just one sentence. Then I stopped. My thumb hovered over the send button, because tomorrow morning, everything in my family was about to change, and the people who ignored me tonight were going to wake up to a reality they never expected. But just before I could press send, My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from someone in that very same family group chat. The notification appeared at the top of the screen. For a moment, I just stared at it, because after hours of silence, someone had finally replied. The message was from my cousin Mark. I opened the chat slowly. Mark had written only 4 words. Is she really dying? My stomach twisted. Not how is she? Not what happened. Just that. The message sat there in the group chat like something cold and ugly. A few seconds later, another message appeared. This time from my aunt. Oh my God, what happened? Then another. My brother Daniel finally wrote. What hospital are you at? I stared at the screen, feeling a strange mixture of emotions I couldn't fully describe. Anger, exhaustion, bitterness, all of it mixing together. Now they were asking questions. Now they were suddenly concerned, hours after my first message. Hours after my daughter had been fighting for her life. I typed a short reply, City General Hospital, ICU. Almost immediately, my phone started vibrating. Daniel was calling. I watched his name flash across the screen. For years, he had always called when something in the family needed to be controlled. Managed, handled. That was Daniel, the responsible one, the successful one, the one everyone trusted. I let the phone ring for a few seconds before answering. Hello. Why didn't you call me earlier? Daniel said immediately. No greeting, no concern in his voice, just irritation. I closed my eyes for a moment. I sent a message in the family chat. I said calmly. He went quiet for a second. Then he exhaled. Yeah, I saw it, but I thought you were exaggerating again. Those words hit harder than I expected. Exaggerating again. As if my daughter being in the ICU was just another dramatic moment in my supposedly chaotic life. She almost died tonight. I said quietly. Daniel didn't respond right away. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. Well, how is she now? Still fighting? Another pause, then Daniel cleared his throat. Listen, I'll come by the hospital in the morning. Morning, not tonight, not now. The same brother who lived only 20 minutes away. That's fine, I said. There was another silence between us. Then Daniel said something that made my eyebrows tighten slightly. Also, have you spoken to Dad tonight? No, I said. Why? Because something weird is happening. My grip on the phone tightened slightly. What do you mean? I just got a call from Carter Holdings. Of course he did. Daniel worked there. They said there's an emergency board meeting tomorrow afternoon. He continued. That doesn't sound unusual. I replied carefully. It is when the legal department refuses to explain why. I didn't say anything. Daniel sighed. Something's going on with Dad's trust. My eyes moved slowly toward the ICU window again. My daughter was still lying there, surrounded by machines. Meanwhile, my family was about to be thrown into chaos. What kind of something? I asked. They wouldn't tell me details. Daniel said, frustration creeping into his voice. But they said tomorrow morning everything changes. I almost smiled. Everything changes. He had no idea how true those words were. Maybe it's just paperwork, I said. Daniel let out a dry laugh. Nothing with Dad is ever just paperwork. That part was true. Our father didn't make small decisions. Everything he did was deliberate, strategic, calculated, which meant if he really had given control of the trust to me, there had to be a reason. Anyway, Daniel continued, I'm going to the hospital to see him early tomorrow. My eyes narrowed slightly. He's in the hospital. You didn't know? No. Yeah. Daniel said, he had a stroke tonight? I stayed silent. So Daniel had found out through the company, not through the lawyer. That meant my father's decision was still mostly secret. He's in critical condition, Daniel added quietly. For the first time during the entire call, he sounded genuinely shaken. Despite everything, our father was still the center of the family, the man whose approval everyone chased. Daniel cleared his throat again. Look, I'll stop by your hospital first thing in the morning. Then I'll go see Dad. Okay. The call ended shortly after. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and sat down again in the cold hallway chair. Everything suddenly felt heavier. My daughter fighting inside the ICU. My father unconscious in another hospital room somewhere. And tomorrow morning. The moment when the truth about the trust would explode across the entire family. My phone buzzed again. More messages in the family chat. My aunt. My cousin. Even my mother had finally written something. Keep us updated about her condition. That was it. No apology for ignoring my first message, no call. Just a polite sentence. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I slowly locked the phone. Right now, none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was the small girl behind the ICU doors. Hours passed slowly. The hospital hallway became quieter. Nurses changed shifts. The clock on the wall crept toward 3 in the morning. I must have dozed off for a few minutes in the chair because the next thing I knew, a nurse was gently shaking my shoulder. Sir, I opened my eyes immediately. What happened? She's asking for you. My heart jumped. Asking. The nurse smiled slightly. Your daughter just woke up? For a moment, the entire world seemed to stop. She woke up? I repeated. Yes! I was already standing before she finished the sentence. The nurse guided me into the ICU room. The machines were still beeping softly. The lights were dim. And there she was. My daughter's eyes were barely open, but she was looking around weakly. When she saw me, her lips moved slightly. Daddy. My chest tightened so hard I had to blink away tears. I'm here, I whispered, taking her tiny hand carefully. You scared me. She murmured weakly. I forced a small smile. You're the bravest kid I know. Her fingers squeezed mine gently before her eyes slowly started closing again. She needs to rest, the nurse said quietly. I nodded and stepped back. But as I walked out of the ICU room, my phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't a message, it was a call. From an unknown number. I answered slowly. Hello? The voice on the other side sounded tense. Mr. Carter, this is Dr. Reynolds from St. Matthew's Hospital. My father's hospital? Yes. I'm calling about your father. My chest tightened slightly. What about him? There was a brief pause. Then the doctor said something that made the hallway suddenly feel colder. Your father regained consciousness for a few minutes. I leaned against the wall. And he asked for only one person? My heart started beating a little faster. Ooh, another pause. Then the doctor said quietly, he asked for you. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. The hallway felt strangely quiet again. Even though nurses were walking past and machines were still humming around me. My father asked for me. I repeated slowly, yes? Dr. Reynolds said. Was only conscious for a short time, but he was very clear. He asked if you had been contacted yet. I leaned against the wall trying to process that. My father had 5 siblings. 2 sons, a large extended family. And somehow the only person he asked for was the one he had spent years criticizing. Is he awake now? I asked. No, the doctor replied. He slipped back into unconsciousness, but the nurses believe he may wake again within the next few hours. I glanced through the ICU window at my daughter. She was sleeping again, her tiny chest rising slowly under the blanket. For the first time that night, her face looked peaceful. The nurse noticed me looking and walked over. Her fever is finally starting to come down, she said softly. Relief washed over me. Can I leave for a little while? I asked quietly. She nodded. She's stable for now. If anything changes, we'll call you immediately. I thanked her and walked toward the hospital exit, my mind still spinning. Outside, the early morning air was cold and quiet. The sky was still dark, but the first faint signs of sunrise were beginning to appear. I drove across the city to St. Matthew's Hospital. When I arrived, the building was calm and nearly empty. Dr. Reynolds met me near the intensive care unit. He looked tired but professional. Thank you for coming so quickly, he said. How is he? I asked. He's stable but very weak. The stroke affected his speech and movement. If he wakes again, it may only be for a few minutes. I nodded slowly. Then the doctor pushed open the ICU door. My father looked smaller than I remembered. For most of my life, he had always seemed larger than everyone else. His presence filled every room. But now he lay quietly in the hospital bed, tubes connected to machines that blinked softly beside him. His face was pale. His eyes were closed. I stood there for a moment before walking closer. Dad, I said quietly. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then slowly, his eyelids moved. His eyes opened just slightly. He looked confused at first. Then his gaze slowly focused on me. And for the first time in years, there was no anger in his eyes, only exhaustion. His lips moved slightly. I leaned closer so I could hear him. You came. His voice was barely more than a whisper. Of course I came, I said. His eyes stayed on mine for several seconds. Then he struggled to lift his hand slightly. I gently held it. His grip was weak, but he squeezed once. I signed the papers, he whispered. I know. He exhaled slowly. They'll hate you for it. A faint, tired smile appeared on my face. They already do. For a moment, his eyes softened. I was wrong about you. Those words stunned me more than anything else that had happened that night. My father had never admitted being wrong. Not once. But now lying in that hospital bed, he looked at me with a strange mixture of regret and pride. I watched everything. He continued slowly. Your business failed, but you kept going. He coughed slightly, and the monitor beside him beeped faster. The others only care about the money, he said. You cared about your daughter. My chest tightened. She almost died tonight, I said quietly. His eyes widened slightly. She's stable now. He closed his eyes briefly in relief. Then he looked back at me. That's why I chose you. I didn't say anything. Money, power, companies. He whispered weakly. None of it matters if you forget what's important. His grip on my hand weakened. Take care of her, he said. I will. His breathing slowed slightly. Then his eyes began closing again. Dad, I said quietly, but he didn't respond. The machines continued their soft rhythm as the doctor stepped forward to check his vitals. He's sleeping again, Dr. Reynolds said. I nodded slowly and stepped back. By the time I left the hospital, the sun had risen. The city was waking up. And somewhere across town, the lawyers were preparing to announce the biggest change my family had ever seen. At exactly 80 a.m., my phone started ringing. Messages, calls, notifications. The news had spread. The Carter family trust now belonged to me. By the time I returned to City General Hospital, my phone had nearly exploded with calls from family members. My mother, my cousins, my aunts. But the one call I knew would come finally appeared on the screen. Daniel, I answered. What did you do? He demanded immediately. Nothing. I replied calmly. You took Dad's entire company? He gave it to me. That's impossible. Daniel snapped. He would never do that. Already did. There was a long silence, and then Daniel's voice dropped. Why? I thought about the conversation in the hospital room, about my daughter's tiny hand squeezing mine in the ICU, about the family chat that stayed silent when I asked for help. Because he realized something, I said. What? That power doesn't belong to the person who talks most about success. Daniel didn't respond. It belongs to the person who shows up when it matters. The line stayed silent for several seconds. Then he hung up. I put the phone away and walked back into the ICU. My daughter was awake again, looking around the room. When she saw me, she smiled weakly. "Daddy, I'm here," I said, sitting beside her outside the hospital room. The world was changing. My family was arguing. Lawyers were calling. Executives were panicking. But none of it mattered, because at that moment, the only thing I cared about was the small hand holding mine. And for the first time in years, I realized something my father had learned too late. The greatest revenge wasn't destroying the people who ignored you. It was proving you never needed them in the first place.